When it comes to the Bills' defense, what's working and what's not? I'm joined by Bruce Nolan to break it all down today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Monday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode of Locked On Bills is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Well, folks, it's time to continue our discussion self-scouting the Buffalo Bills, this time focusing on the defensive side of the football. And I'm joined by Bruce Nolan from the Bruce Exclusive Podcast and Food for Thought. Bruce, I think this is like the 4th year in a row or something we've got together on a bye week to talk about the Bills' defense. Excited to do it. Thank you for giving me some of your time.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. The number one thing that I take away from our conversations is that I am not offensive. That's the number one thing I take away from this, because every bye week it's me and the defense. So I just turn around and tell my wife, hey, Joe has decided that I'm not offensive, so I'm good with it.
Does that mean you're defensive?
Well, I can get a little defensive, I think, at times. I think if you were to ask my wife, I think she'd probably tell you I can get a little defensive sometimes. So, yeah, no, I think this fits me.
Bruce, I like your offense takes, but defense, it just feels like it's your sweet spot with all your secondary knowledge and the debates we've had about pass rush and coverage. It's a natural topic for us to unite over, and so let's do it. Let's start by talking about this Bills pass defense. I want to get into what's working and what's not working, and really, defense has been good this year, right? So we're going to kind of have to do some searching here to talk about some things that can be better, but focusing in on the pass defense, where, Bruce, right now, opposing teams are averaging only 3.9 adjusted net yards per attempt against the Bills defense. So when they drop back to pass, they're getting less than 4 yards on average. That's an extraordinary number, and they were in the 3s last year as well. So it's not just a 6-game sample size. This is how good this pass defense has been year over year under McDermott and Frazier and John Butler and all the outstanding coaching. So, Bruce, I'll give you the floor first. What's working? What are the high-level things that are working for this Bills pass defense right now?
If you're a pass rush guy and if you're a coverage guy, it doesn't particularly matter because both things are working for the Buffalo Bills right now. If you ascribe to PFF grades, PFF's number 1 team for pass rush grade, and they're in a 7 in coverage. Now, I've had my questions about PFF's coverage grade specifically in the past, but let's say that you prefer passer rating against as a secondary measure, which I do. I like passer rating against as a measure of secondary play. The passer rating against the Buffalo Bills secondary right now is 77. That is really, really, really low. As far as pass rush, they have 5 players with a greater than 15% pass rush win rate. Number 1 on the team is actually not Von Miller. It's Gregory Rousseau. So if Von Miller is your star pass rusher and he's not even the number 1 player on your team when it comes to pass rush win rate, you're having a pretty good year when it comes to those kind of things. So many things are going well for the pass defense. It feels like to me, and I mentioned this very early, very, very early in the year, when I watched the Rams game, I walked away from it and said, this feels like the pinnacle of what Sean McDermott has been trying to build with Leslie Frazier since he got here. It feels like the Super Bowl Eagles defense. It feels like the Super Bowl Carolina defense, where you have these waves and waves of good, fresh pass rushers you can throw at someone, and you have good, sound defensive coverage, which great linebackers help you achieve right there on the back end. It feels like what they've been trying to build. It feels like the pinnacle of everything they've been trying to accomplish since they got here.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, Bruce. Basically, what you said there is everything. The pass rush is working, the coverage is working. If I had to laser in on some things that stand out to me, the secondary depth is absolutely working, Bruce. It doesn't make a lot of sense that it doesn't seem to matter who has played for this team, and a lot of them have, right? Whether it's been rookie corners, Cam Lewis, Damar Hamlin, Jaquan Johnson not having Poyer and Hyde together. It doesn't seem to matter who they're putting in there on that in the corner and safety positions. They're performing well, and I think that's a testament to the scheme. It's a testament to the players that they brought in and how they prepare and get themselves ready. But the secondary depth is working just as well as the high-level players that you would expect to be doing their job. But the interchangeability of this roster and really showing off the depth, particularly in the secondary, has been really, really good. I'd say number two for me is playing the ball. I think the Bills have been phenomenal at the catch point this year in terms of pass defense. They've got 10 interceptions. That's number one in the NFL. They've got 35 pass breakups. That's number two in the NFL. But that's facing the 14th most attempts, right? So there's not a relationship there between just a ton of passing attempts against your defense, and therefore by way of that, you have a ton of pass breakups. They have 35 pass breakups to go with the 14th most attempts, and I think that's very, very impressive. There's a lot of disruption at the catch point. They're forcing incomplete passes. And then number three, I would say Milano and Edmonds. I think they've been a good pair of linebackers since they've been together. I think in coverage specifically, this is the best we've ever seen them. Their eye discipline is really good. They're doing some great matchup stuff. They're taking throws off the menu. They're forcing throws to different areas of the field that are harder to complete passes. I think they're a big reason why this pass defense has been good. So secondary depth for me, playing the ball in the air, and those linebackers, Milano and Edmonds, I think are a big reason why this pass defense has been so good through 6 games.
One of the little sneaky things that I don't think you notice unless you dive really far into it is you kind of look at the Buffalo Bills defense as kind of a stock plug and play defense. And that's reinforced by the depth discussion that you just had. The fact that you can just plug these people in off the bench and seemingly get great results kind of reinforces this fact that, well, it's just kind of a system thing. It's just plug them in. There's some subtleties to this that I think I really need to appreciate a little bit more. The Buffalo Bills corners have all different gaps between man coverage snaps and zone coverage snaps because they play at different times and they've been platooning and things like that. The player on the Buffalo Bills that has the most significant gap between percentage of man coverage snaps and percentage of zone coverage snaps is Kaiir Elam, which I think is it's a pretty expected outcome if you have a defense that's being tailored to someone who was a press man corner in college. So I know that this is skewed a little bit because the Buffalo Bills came out against the Kansas City Chiefs and played almost 50-50 man versus zone, which they had not been previously doing. And Kaiir Elam was a lot of that. But this is just further evidence that it's not just a Sean McDermott plug and play system. This is being tailored by Leslie Frazier to the players that he has, whether he's platooning those players. Damar Hamlin is another great example. Damar Hamlin plays a lot of man coverage, way more than Micah Hyde ever did. And that's something that's a little bit different as well. And so we kind of look at this as if it's some sort of plug and play, but there's some subtle techniques being used. There's some subtle manipulation, and it's so well ingrained in these players who have been in the system that at first glance, you don't even necessarily notice it. It's a thing of beauty because it's being so subtly manipulated. And I think Leslie Frazier deserves some credit for that on the pass defense.
That's a good shout out. Let's talk about what's not working, and this is going to be a little bit challenging. And just as a disclaimer, I'll start here, but I want everyone to know that I have to nitpick here, right? This is a high-level pass defense, and so to find the flaws, it's challenging. But if there's anything that I would say, and I don't have like a long list of things, I would say that the pass rush could be better. And again, that's nitpicking, but we're talking about a team right now that is creating pressure on 23% of pass plays against them. That's 20th in the NFL. You certainly feel like that can be higher, but they're getting a ton of sacks, right? 8.4% sack rate. in terms of dropbacks. That's fifth best in the NFL. So it's a little bit different than last year where it was a lot of pressures, but not a lot of sacks. This year it's a lot of sacks and still a good amount of pressure, but maybe not to the same volume. And so I think there's an opportunity for the Bills pass rush to show up even more than it has. And I'm looking at two players in particular, and I don't think it's their fault that they haven't been overly impactful. They've been injured, and it's Ed Oliver and Tim Settle. I think the Bills are missing what they can be as interior pass rushers, not to mention Jordan Phillips, who certainly had his moments, but he's missed time with a hamstring injury. So whether it's been Ed Oliver's ankle, Tim Settle's quad, or Jordan Phillips' hamstring, I don't think they've gotten the impact that they're capable collectively out of all three of those guys. And so as I think about how this pass defense can be better, I go to the rush a little bit. I go particularly to the inside and the three banged up defensive tackles that I think are capable of making a bigger impact than they have to this point.
I had pressure percentage and hurry percentage right there at the top of my list, but I thought you might go there. So I had a backup plan in the event that we did. We're nitpicking our nitpicks at this point. That's how far deep we're going. I have a contingency nitpick. My contingency nitpick is this. The Bills were first in yards per attempt against in 2021. They are seventh in yards per attempt against in 2022. And the reason that is the net is lower is because of the sacks. Like you just said, the net yards per attempt against is lower because of the sacks. But when the quarterback is getting the ball out, they are on average getting a little bit more than they were. Now, the ADOT against is still low. It's 6.6 yards for average depth of target against, but it's not quite as low percentage-wise in the NFL as it was last year. So the ADOT is creeping up relative to the rest of the league. And because of that, the yards per attempt when the quarterback does get it out is kind of creeping up a little bit relative to the rest of the league. Again, really significant nitpick. And there's one more thing I'm going to talk about, but it's going to kind of go into our run defense negative. So I'm going to save it for that.
This episode is brought to you by Prediction Strike, the world's first sports stock market. You can now invest in professional athletes just like stocks. It's a lower risk alternative to sports betting, and the athlete prices move based on performance and supply and demand. So if you invested in Jalen Hurts 1 year ago, you'd be up 48.2%. Rashad Penny is up 154%. Kyle Pitts is down 44.12% after struggling to start the year. And you can invest in 4 sports, not just NFL, but UFC, NBA, and MLB. Everyone knows you should be investing, but why not invest in what you actually know as a football fanatic? Download the Prediction Strike app and use code LOCKED for a free share when you sign up and make a deposit of $20 or more. That's promo code LOCKED for a special one-time giveaway. Prediction Strike will choose one person who signs up with code LOCKED and make a deposit to win 100 free random shares. That could be worth up to $3,000 if you get lucky and receive Josh Allen shares. Invest in what you know on Prediction Strike, the stock market for sports. Whether you're looking to pop the question, have a milestone to celebrate, or want to let your love sparkle, Blue Nile can help you make your celebrations even more memorable. As the original online jeweler, Blue Nile offers the largest selection of independently graded diamonds and prices priced significantly below traditional retailers. Blue Nile has helped millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring. Their easy online tools let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as the setting style. And maybe you're looking for a piece of fine jewelry to commemorate a special milestone, but still having trouble choosing. Don't worry, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Shop stress-free with Blue Nile's 100% satisfaction guarantee. All Blue Nile orders are insured and shipped for free in discreet packaging. They also offer overnight shipping if you're in a rush. Make your moment sparkle with Blue Nile. Go to BlueNile.com and use promo code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's BLUENILE.com. Code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. BlueNile.com. Code LOCKEDON. So, Bruce, let's talk about run defense for the Buffalo Bills. I know this has not been a strength of the team for most years under Sean McDermott. It's kind of a tendency to give up some bigger plays, get gashed a little bit. Not so far this year. The Bills, the number one rush defense in the NFL in terms of yards per game at 76.2. They're number 2 in yards per carry against them at 3.5. This thing is working, and I will give you the floor to talk about what the reasons behind that are.
Daquan Jones. That's it. Let's just end the podcast right now. Daquan
Right.
Jones. We're ending. Daquan Jones is every bit as impactful as the most optimistic, read as me, was going into this year when it comes to Daquan Jones. I waxed poetic on and on and on in the offseason, thinking that Daquan Jones was going to give the Buffalo Bills a presence that they were hoping they were going to get from Star Lotulelei. A ridiculous double team rate. And even despite that, as a one tech, an extremely profitable pass rush win rate, which I know we're not talking about pass defense, but the fact that you can get that kind of play when you're getting double teamed, Daquan Jones, without hyperbole, has been one of the best one tech defensive tackles in football this year. That is not me being hyperbolic. He is having an absurd season, and that's trickling in to a lot of other things. Matt Milano is 4th among linebackers with 100 run defense snaps at a 10.7% stop percentage. A stop is considered to be a tackle that constitutes a failure for the offense. A failure for the offense is not getting 40% of the needed yards on first down, 60% on second down, or 100% on third down. Basically, keeping them behind the chains, right? Keeping them constantly behind the chains. Daquan Jones and Matt Milano, second in the NFL in yards per carry allowed, 3.5. Ridiculous numbers. The best run defense Sean McDermott's had. Even back when you had the cold front, which is a great pass rush defense. Sean McDermott didn't have that. But when Rex Ryan had it, and you have a team that he just destroyed basically, but you have a pass rush with those 4 fearsome players across the front, you still didn't have a run defense this good. It was really, really, really good. And when I look at Daquan Jones and you think to yourself, it's amazing how impactful one player can be and can trickle through. We always have a tendency to believe that that player is Von Miller. That's what we believe. We think that Von Miller is going to trickle through the rest of the defensive line. And he has, by all means. I would make an argument that Daquan Jones has had a more ripple effect on the entire defense than Von Miller does. And I am thrilled that after years and years of arguing about the value of a one technique, especially in a nickel-heavy defense where you put so much on your linebackers and all the math that is associated with having gaps up front, that the Buffalo Bills one tech is one of the best in football.
Yeah, it's refreshing. We've wanted this for a long time, and Daquan is playing at a high level, and I he's always been a good one tech, and just another example of Buffalo being a place where players come and be the best version of themselves, because you don't expect a breakout for a player that's been in the league as long as Daquan Jones has been. But I think when we laser in on circumstances and scenario and environment, you can say, well, look, he hadn't played for the Bills yet, and that gave him his best opportunity to be the best version of himself. And so as I look at my list of things I wanted to mention for what's working with the Bills run defense, number 1 was Daquan Jones. I think we all understand that. Number 2, I do go back to the linebackers. I think Tremaine Edmunds and Matt Milano have been the best downhill players that they've ever been in their careers so far this year. And Daquan Jones, again, the trickle effect of his presence matters for that. And obviously Greg Rousseau, a very good run defender, that helps. But that interior ability, that selflessness of Daquan Jones to take on blocks and allow those guys to run free has mattered a ton, especially when you think about, like you mentioned, the Bills are a base nickel defense. There's really never 3 linebackers on the field. And the linebackers are forced to kind of make the defensive line right. There's a lot of gap exchanges present with the Bills defense, and that puts a lot of these linebackers to make them right with how they leverage blocks, and they've been phenomenal. So the front, right? The front has been very, very good, and I would highlight Jones and the linebackers. The one other thing I want to mention here on what's working for the Bills run defense has been just forcing teams, right? Because of what you're to pace with the Bills in terms of scoring. The Bills have been scoring a lot of points, and they've been able to get up on some teams, or even in other situations kind of pull away in the third quarter. And it goes back to that forcing teams to be one-dimensional. And I think the ability of the Bills offense helps the defense, particularly with the run. Because, hey, if you want to beat the Bills, I think everybody knows you better get into the 30s. You better get into the mid 30s and push for 40 if you're going to win that ball game. And I think the offense helps the defense in a way here when it comes to the run defense in particular.
The other thing that I want to point out when it comes to the Buffalo Bills run defense specifically is that the discussions that we've had and we just finished having about Ed Oliver and Tim Settle and Jordan Phillips, there's still room for improvement here on the run defense because Ed Oliver was trending in an incredibly positive direction at the end of 2021 and then got hampered really early by an injury. And we still, the Buffalo Bills have been winning, so we haven't really been talking about it. But if the Buffalo Bills were losing, I think we'd be talking a lot more about the fact that Ed Oliver's been banged up and hasn't been able to be the kind of player that we wanted him to be. And last week he played and, you didn't see the splash plays that you historically see from Ed Oliver. And you didn't see the splash plays that you historically see from Jordan Phillips and all those things because they've been banged up. And so I think that there's still, to borrow your phrase, untapped potential for the Buffalo Bills run defense. And I think that there's still room to go up there.
Good poll there. I don't have to talk about untapped potential quite as much these days as the team has developed. Also, one other thing that I overlooked that I meant to say already was kudos to you for getting the Rex Ryan dig in. It's been a while since I've had one on this podcast, and normally I meet the quota, but you came through for me because we like to slander Rex Ryan every opportunity that we can here on the Locked On Bills podcast. Bruce, let's talk about what's not working with the Bills' run defense. And again, nitpicking here, but I do have two things that come to mind here, and hopefully I don't steal all your talking points. But number one, I think that Dane Jackson and Kyer Elam can be better support players. I do. I think that they've been good players this year, but when I think of how their impact could be better, I think their ability to trigger playoff contact and tackle against the run is an area that can make an outstanding Bills run defense even better. And so I don't think they're terrible at that. I just feel like there's room for them to be better and more consistent in that area. Number two, and this is one of my biggest pet peeves when I watch football, it's defensive ends rushing the passer and getting out of their run fits when the other team is running the football. There has been a fair amount of situations this year where you're watching Greg Rousseau and Von Miller and AJ Epinesa rush the passer while the other team is running the football. And they have a lot of liberty, obviously, because they go inside quite a bit, especially Von Miller. Von Miller will go inside. He'll shoot the B gap a good amount and get out of his run fits. And so I guess I would just label it as discipline. I think their defensive ends can be more disciplined against the run to make it even better. I think Milano has hid some of that with some of his very outstanding open field tackles. But there have been some instances where I'm just kind of palms to the air wondering, Von, what are you doing? Greg, what are you doing? AJ, what are you doing? You have to play the run. You can't just sell out and give them that outside ability. You can't just shoot the B gap and when you're responsible for squeezing and maintaining that outside contain. So there's been some of that's bothered me this year, but not a ton, not like we have fatal flaws here, just something that I noticed as we talk about an outstanding run defense and I nitpick to find issues. I think some better support from Dane Jackson and Kyer Elam and a little more discipline from the defensive ends could even make this run defense better.
We used to call those uncalled gap exchanges.
I've never heard that, but I like it.
It's a gap exchange I did not know was coming. Wait a second. Hold on. What's going on here? The coaching tip that you always hear from players that their coaches give them when it's play the run on the way to the quarterback. It's play the run on the way to the quarterback. And so I'd agree with that. I'm so glad that you didn't step on this one. I know that you are cognizant and hyper cognizant toward this particular issue. The first 3 games, the Buffalo Bills tackled really well. The last 3 games, it's starting to sneak up. 6-3-3 were the missed tackles the first 3 games. 12-7-10 are the missed tackles the last 3 games. The Bills crept up from all the way at the very beginning of the year. They were all the way at the bottom when it comes to missed tackles. Now they're 10th worst in the NFL in missed tackles. Just showed up again. And so what we were kind of hoping, maybe we were done talking about that, it reared its ugly head again. And with the looming return of Trey White, who has never been known as being an overly great tackler, I don't anticipate this is going to pop up and suddenly just disappear. It's just going to pop up and then, we're going to see it in the next 3 games. It's going to be back to good again. I don't think that's going to happen. So I think this is going to be a narrative we're going to be talking about, unfortunately, again, moving forward. And when you're forced to nitpick things, which, let's be honest, I am forced to nitpick things, I am going to find things like tackling to nitpick.
Of course, that coincides with me saying this is the best tackling defense Sean McDermott's ever had, and they rewarded me by missing a bunch of tackles. And it was funny, I was at the tailgate in Kansas City, and a bunch of people we kind of snuck up in a conversation where it's like, wow, the tackling's been really good. It's been kind of trending the wrong way. And now, by the way, you happen to just come out and say that you thought this was the best tackling defense that Sean McDermott's ever had. I hope you've been getting in on the action over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is my favorite daily fantasy resource. How does it work? You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available, and it's not just football. They've got it all: NBA, MLB, golf, NHL, college sports, you name it, you can find it, and entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. So if you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Bills Mafia, we all know what that sound is. It's the glorious sound of a table breaking in half from a body slam. And it's something Bills fans do best. Now listen to this. You know what that sound is? It's a chip breaking mid-dip in guacamole. Not so glorious. The thing is, some things are meant to be broken, like tables at tailgates, but chips and dips, definitely not. That's why the team at Zach's Mighty Tortilla Chips set out to create a chip that can actually handle dips without breaking. Talk about game-changing. I love these chips. My wife and I, we have dips all the time, whether it's buffalo chicken dip, artichoke dip, spinach dip. We actually just had chicken tortilla soup recently, and they were phenomenal in that. And they're perfectly seasoned. They're made from organic Flint corn in upstate New York. They're sturdy, crunchy, and delicious. You can find Zach's Mighty Tortilla Chips at all Wegmans locations in the chip aisle. Zach's Mighty, break tables, not chips. Bruce, let's talk about some situational football here, third downs, red zone, and then I have some personnel questions that I want to kind of close with here. We talked about a lot of good things here with the run defense and the pass defense, but I think the situational football can be a little bit better, third down and red zone. Third down, the Bills are 18th in the league. They're allowing conversion 38.9% of the time. Middle of the pack, but certainly for a defense that is so good at limiting yards and limiting points, you'd be surprised to hear that they're not a great third down defense. What are you noticing on third downs for the Buffalo Bills?
I am trying not to overreact to this quite yet. And the reason that is because two of the best quarterbacks in football at converting ridiculous third downs are Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. Mm-hmm. The other one happens to play for this team, and that's Josh Allen, where you can put him 3rd and 13 on his own 1, for example, and he'll manage to pull it out. Not that we, heard about it, it happens occasionally. But Lamar Jackson does that thing where the way that you put your palms to the air when something happens with the uncalled gap exchange, that's the same way that other people look at Josh Allen when he converts a 3rd and 13. You go, you think you have him down and you don't. Well, it's the same way when 2 of your 6 games have occurred against Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, who can convert third and ridiculouses. That's a very technical term.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Third and ridiculousness against a lot of defenses and make a lot of people pull their hair out. So I'm trying hard not to overreact to it, because I think if those are non-special quarterbacks, I think if those are not Patrick Mahomes, I think if those are not Lamar Jackson, because look at how the Los Angeles Rams did on third down against the Buffalo Bills.
Horrible.
Right? Yeah. Look at how they, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, that's Matt Stafford's a great quarterback. He's not Lamar Jackson as far as converting those third and longs. He's not Patrick Mahomes as far as converting those third and longs. So I noticed it. I thought about it. I thought about context. I thought about 2 out of the 6. I thought, okay, that's, 1/3 of the Buffalo Bills games. Are they a top 9 defense if we don't face Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson? Maybe when it comes to third down. So I'm noticing it. I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm trying not to react yet, but it's something I've got my eye on.
For me, this is what I where I go to with it, and I would agree that the frustrating part of this metric has been the third and longs that have been converted against the Bills defense, and I wonder if it's more of a philosophy thing where they don't quite have the needle threaded where they know when to pressure and force that decision to be made quicker, or when to kind of play back and dare them to make a throw or dare them to win after the catch. I feel like they've been caught in between at times, and they need to kind of solidify what their best plan is. A little bit like what I talk about on the offense, where when they're facing the blitz, they're kind of in the crossroads of, do we protect or do we throw hot? And I wonder on the third and longs if they're kind of in that same crossroads of, okay, do we play a little more straight up here and just be what we are and play a little bit aggressive and force this ball to come out quick? Or do we kind of play back, stay leveraged, make a tackle? And the Titans caught him on that one time early in that game. One of the best offensive play calls I've ever seen. It was a 3rd and 18 or something like that. They knew what the Bills were going to be in. And you know the play I'm talking about. They had the crosser, and then everybody was blocking. They knew the defense. It was a phenomenal play call. But I just feel like teams are kind of catching the Bills being a little bit too loose on third and longs, and they're converting.
Part of me wonders if having so many faces in there who don't have the subtleties to their landmarks and the depth of targets, that makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have a player who is Trey White in there, and you have a player who's Micah Hyde in there, and you know it's 3rd and 15, you know exactly what yardage. I mean, Micah Hyde's sense of depth is the reason why he's so good. Because Micah Hyde is a good athlete, but he's not like an elite upper shelf athlete. But Micah Hyde's perception of space and depth is so important. And it's so important to playing safety and just not allowing your mind to wander and your feet to wander. You know, one of the things we talked about all the time when I was talking to defensive backs was, don't allow your feet to wander with your mind. No, don't allow your feet to wander with your mind, right? So you're back there and you're keeping an eye on something. You don't even realize that you backpedaled like 3 yards, right? You just kind of lose it. You're kind of drifting. You're drifting. And all of a sudden you're not where you're supposed to be anymore. And so some of these new players, when I say new, I don't mean new to the system, but new to actual meaningful playing time. You wonder if a yard here, a yard there, all of a sudden they're not quite where they're supposed to be. They're not quite at their landmarks. That's something that has to be considered when it comes to this stuff too.
That's a good point. I like that a lot. Red zone defense, the Bills allowing a touchdown 50% of the times. 8 of 16 other teams are scoring a touchdown when they cross the 20. Number 9 in the NFL, they're top 10. They're doing well here. I think they can get better here. Anything compelling on your mind when you consider the Bills' red zone defense so far in 2022?
I think the ability to play more man down in the red zone, I think as the Bills year goes along with the development of Kaiir Elam will help, because a lot of the stuff that you can see run in the red zone, a lot of it's really hard counters. You know, and that's a lot of what you see in the red zone. A lot of it's really hard counters. That's why coaching is so important in the red zone. You have teams that struggle in the red zone. Usually it's a coaching thing. You're looking at the Denver Broncos right now. I'm giving them a side eye right now when it comes to the Broncos in the red zone and Nathaniel Hackett, the struggles he's had. A lot of red zone and not red zone is coaching. It's one of the things we talk about over and over again when it comes to play calling, and it's hard counters. It's you have this, I have this. It's one of the reasons why you see all the most creative play calls from teams like Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs. You see all the crazy stuff come out in the red zone because they know that rock, paper, scissors as an offensive and defensive concept is never stronger than it is in the red zone because the margin for error is way worse. And I think that the ability to do more things as the year goes along will probably help. I think getting Trey White back, I think is really going to help a lot when it comes to that. And top 10, you know, it's really hard to nitpick when it comes to that, but also the things that you were talking about earlier, the things where you're selling out, you know, you sell out on the 10-yard line to get inside. That uncalled gap exchange starts to pop up. That matters a lot more now, because now if Matt Milano is not able to make a Superman play, now they're running it into the end zone. So I think some of that disciplinary stuff shows up here as well.
One note that I want to make here about red zone defense, and I think this is just a byproduct of what this Bills team is, and just putting yourself in the opponent's perspective a lot of times I think is helpful. If you're playing against the Bills and you're some middle pack NFL team, which, let's face it, that's a big chunk of the league right now. There's probably 3 really, really good teams, a couple really bad ones, and then everybody else. So if you're in this, I don't know, probably 25 team bucket of everybody else, you got to score, right? You got to score touchdowns to beat Josh Allen. The Bills are going to have to stop teams in the red zone for 4 downs on a lot of occasions. You're not settling down there against Josh Allen, right? Who can basically turn it on and score it seemingly at will at times. And so I wonder, just as this team kind of hits its stride, just the reality of having to understand that it's a 4 down situation in the red zone, and teams aren't just going to settle. And we've seen that, right? We saw Coach Harbaugh make that decision with the game on the line because he didn't want it to be a 4 down game for Josh Allen. And I think that's going to be it's just, you're going to see this be harder and harder for the Bills to keep at a good number, just based on the amount of teams that are going to play 4 downs in the red zone against Buffalo.
Knowing how the way you play offense affects the way you play defense, and the results you get on offense affect the results you play on defense, is part of just understanding football on a holistic level. So yeah, I'm all the way on board.
All right, let's close on this. Really interested on your thoughts on Trey White's return, what you think the onboarding process is, and then from there, what about all this corner depth, Bruce? We've been dreaming for this, and I assume that you're in on the corner depth like I am. Like, you're pleased with Trey White coming back and what Dane Jackson's been and what Kyer Elam's been and what Christian Benford's been. How do you sort this out in a world where everyone's healthy? So first, your thoughts on onboarding Trey White, who hasn't played football since last Thanksgiving, and what to do when everyone's healthy.
When I look at the way that the Buffalo Bills handled the onboarding of their rookie, that gives me sort of a track to run on when I think about onboarding someone who's coming back from an injury, and that is series by series platoon. So I would not be surprised if that's what we saw from Tre'Davious White in his first, maybe even second game back, is one series off the field, one series off the field, because they don't do it play by play. They do it by series by series. And I think that that's smart. I would rather do it series by series than play by play. I think you can get in a rhythm that way. You don't have to worry about running it on and off the field and having all those things going along with substitutions. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Tre'Davious White platooning with one of the rookies and Dane Jackson on the other side. That would not shock me at all. As far as what do you do when he's back to a full-time player, I would be surprised if it wasn't Tre'Davious White and Dane Jackson, because it was Tre'Davious White and Levi Wallace for all those years, no matter who they brought in. When we were looking at Dane Jackson, all those years, well, maybe Dane Jackson's the answer. Levi Wallace chugged out there every single time. So I would be surprised if it was not Tre'Davious White and Dane Jackson until the time that, as such, you have Kyer Elam is clearly the better player. And I don't think that's true right now. I don't think Kyer Elam is clearly the better player than Dane Jackson, because Dane Jackson, again, understands the system. He understands his landmarks. He doesn't have those things that we talked about earlier when it comes to allowing his feet to drift or any of that stuff. That stuff doesn't happen. And they've spoken incredibly highly of Dane Jackson. They did this entire offseason. And when Brandon Beane made a move for a corner, he goes, yeah, we need a corner. But he didn't necessarily say they needed a starting quarterback. He almost felt like they just needed a body. Mm-hmm. So everything that they've said from the top down has given me the idea that it's going to be Tre'Davious White and Dane Jackson. And it may at some point be Kyer Elam later on down the line. We might just randomly in week 12 go, oh, look, there's Kyer Elam starting. But until that day occurs, I think you might see a platoon from Tre'Davious White while he's getting on board, and then it's going to be White and Jackson.
Man, I am excited for the day that Kyer Elam is like ready to be the guy opposite of Trey White. Because you want to talk about 2 guys that could take away the football. Oh, man. I am excited for that moment. Last one for you, Bruce. Just want to get some impressions from you on Damar Hamlin, who's been thrust into this starting lineup. Maybe a little bit of a surprise that it wasn't Jaquan Johnson replacing Micah Hyde, but it's been Damar Hamlin. And I get a lot of questions about how's he playing and what is your thoughts about him potentially being a real starter for this team in future years. What have you seen?
I've been really happy with what I've seen from Damar Hamlin. I went back because I got a question for my show, and I went back and I watched Damar Hamlin, and it cracked me up a little bit because the first snap I was watching of him, he was off in, a different zip code. I said Greg Williams would be really proud
Saw
of the
that
place
tweet,
where
yeah.
you're putting him.
Yeah.
So, Jabril Peppers is still having nightmares of being in a different county than the actual play is occurring. But for me, when I look at Damar Hamlin, the first thing that stops out is his play versus the run. His play versus the run has been exactly what you would want it to be when you have a system that asks your DBs to come up. And I've said before that playing the run and fitting the run from distance is an incredibly hard thing to do. It's one of the most difficult things in football to do that nobody talks about, is filling for the run from distance. And Jordan Poyer can do it. And it's one of the reasons you can consistently play in too high and still say, you know what, Taron Johnson, you can take care of that extra gap. Jordan Poyer, you can come from distance and fill versus the run. And they do it consistently over and over and over again. So when I look at what makes the Bills defense tick, right, one of those things is safeties being able to come from distance and fill versus the run. And Damar Hamlin can do that. So right when I do that, I go, okay, big box, checked. Now, move along. Is he vastly out of position when it comes to playing deep passes? Because again, what is it that makes the Bills defense tick? The first one is what I already mentioned. A second one is being able to take away big plays. Is he where he's supposed to be? Yes, he's where he's supposed to be. I've been very happy with Damar Hamlin. I talked a lot about systemic depth on the show not too long ago. And I said, listen, when you have these players who have been in the system for a long time, you can kind of make up for the fact that maybe they're not Jordan Poyer. And I've been very, very pleased with what I've seen from Damar Hamlin. And I think if this continues, I think the can we let Jordan Poyer walk conversation is going to get loud, especially if Tremaine Edmunds continues his play. Because at the very beginning of this year, that narrative was very different because you hadn't seen the alternative. Well, now you've seen a little bit of the alternative and people are feeling okay. And now all of a sudden you start looking at the Panthers defenses and the safeties they had there. And you start thinking, well, maybe you can make it work without Jordan Poyer, who's, in his 30s and looking for a meaningful contract. Maybe that can happen. I think that Damar Hamlin has an opportunity to single-handedly change a significant narrative around this team heading into 2023.
Your comments on systemic depth was one of my favorite bits that you've done so far this year on the Bruce exclusive. And so as we get out of here today, folks, make sure that you are listening to the Bruce exclusive part of the Buffalo Rumblings podcast feed and following Bruce on Twitter at Bruce exclusive, because he's somebody that I learn a lot from. And that's why I love talking to him. That's why I love listening to the podcast, is because my opinions are challenged and I get new perspective and insight on the team. So Bruce, I guess I did the sell your work part for you, but anything that you'd like to say to the folks about where they can keep up with more of your analysis?
Anytime somebody smarter than me will plug me, I will take it over a self-plug by all means. Thank you so much for having me, Joe. I really appreciate it. Like you said, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Bruce Exclusive. I am now writing for BuffaloRumblings.com as well. So I have our 2 articles a week that pop out on BuffaloRumblings.com. So you can find that stuff there. And my show, the Bruce Exclusive, drops every Thursday on the Buffalo Rumblings Podcast Network. And then we do a lighter side of the show with Food for Thought with Nate Geary that drops as a podcast on Saturday mornings and is a live show on Friday evenings on the Buffalo Rumblings YouTube at 9 p.m.
Bruce, as always, thank you for a great conversation. That's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. Tomorrow, we get back to our routine a little bit, herd mentality. Before Wednesday, we set our sights on the Green Bay Packers, the Bills' next game. So we're making it through this off time for the Buffalo Bills. It's been really fun. I enjoy it all, whether it's game weeks, bye weeks, middle of July, June. It doesn't matter. I love talking about this team. So thanks for joining me. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.